morning. Today is about the survivors. It's about aligning the letter of the law with the pain in their hearts. It's about calling out violent, horrific acts for what they are, so survivors can reclaim their power and dignity. And it's about backing them with the full force of our justice system, so those who commit rape are charged accordingly. In a few moments, we'll put to rest a decade-long debate to determine what legally constitutes rape in the state of New York. And so many people fought to get us here. And I want to acknowledge them. Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel, our bill sponsor. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Assemblymember Catalina Cruz, the Assembly sponsor. Former Assemblymember Arevalo Samotis, who was the original bill sponsor. Thank you. John Watson, the Acting Director of the Office of Victim Services. Thank you, John, for all your work on this. And Kelly Owens, the Executive Director of the Office of Prevention of Domestic Violence. You know, you open up the newspapers, if you actually open up newspapers or see it on your digital device. But I couldn't help but notice a recurring theme in the headlines. Influential men abusing their positions of power to inflict pain on women. And despite our incredible strides as society, powerful men are still able to commit despicable acts on women, often with impunity. From leaders in business, from those from the highest levels of government. And though she couldn't be with us here today, I want to take a moment to recognize E. Jean Carroll for her courageous efforts to make sure justice was done, and to bring a case against the former president whose defamatory and disgusting statements exacerbated a horrific situation. Now, as the first woman governor of the state of New York, it's been my mission since day one to enact stronger protections for women in every walk of life. We've made New York a safe harbor for abortion, strengthened laws that take guns away from abusers, rooted out the culture of harassment in these hallowed halls of this very building, and cleared the way for adult survivors to hold their abusers accountable. That mission continues today. Roughly 90% of rape survivors are women, but the problem is rape is very difficult to prosecute. That's because New York's archaic laws define rape in very narrow terms. Physical technicalities confuse jurors and humiliate survivors and create a legal gray area that defendants exploit. You take the case of a woman, Lydia Cuomo, a woman who deserves incredible credit for jump-starting the conversation about the need to update our laws. More than a decade ago, she watched in shock as her case played out in court. Jurors struggled to square her account of what happened to her with New York's high legal threshold for rape. They were hung up on trivial details, like she couldn't recall the color of a car that was parked outside. Therefore, she must not be able to recall what happened to her during this so-called rape. This is what she had to endure. She was raped at gunpoint. But given the existing language of law, that's all she had. And I want to tell you what she said. She said, "Right is right. He raped me, and at the end of the day, he's not being called a rapist. He is a rapist, and you need to call rape, rape." She said those acts now follow under the description of a sexual assault, which she had to endure. And she said it's erroneous because it makes it sound like the attack isn't so bad. She said there's nothing sexual about it. It was an act of violence. And she wanted to make sure that forced anal and oral sex be classified as rape under the law. Lydia took too many years. Lydia's since moved away. This article was written in 2013. Think of all the cases, where women like Lydia had to go into court with the law as it was written, despite the horrific acts that occurred to them, whether it's gunpoint in a parking lot or in a workplace setting. It doesn't matter. These women did not receive justice for all this time because of the way the law was written. And now, we will say, despite what happened then, that yes, there was an attack, yes, it was horrible, but it wasn't raped. Because rape carries a certain weight to it. It gives survivors a way to describe what happened to them. Naming it is the first step to confronting it. And confronting it is how you eventually move forward and take back your power. On the flip side, if we refuse to call something what it is, we as society refuse to say rape is rape, we invalidate the survivors, trivialize their pain, and ultimately intensify their trauma. That somehow what they went through is less serious. It's time to right this wrong. Today I'm signing a bill that broadens the definition of rape to include additional forms of sexual violence. These are acts we would commonly accept as rape, but until now have fallen outside the legal definition. And rewriting these laws is also important to the LGBTQ plus community, who've been too long ignored when it comes to prosecution under our New York State rape statutes. Justice denied for too long. Today we're bringing the language of the law in line with what survivors have been forced to endure. We're reassuring survivors that when they walk into a police station or approach the witness stand, the full weight of the law of the state of New York is behind them. It's behind them now going forward. Rape will be treated like the horrific crime that it is. So I'm here today to say the voices have been heard. Reaffirm that justice will be served. And I'm grateful again for all the people who stood up, the advocates, the survivors, often having to repeat what they experienced. It's painful. It's so painful. We want them to know they've been heard. Their voices have been heard in the halls of this Capitol, finally, after over a decade of waiting. And I want to thank our advocates. Former Assembly Member Arabella Simotas, thank you. Thank you for starting the conversation again. Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz, thank you again for carrying on the fight. Again, incredible leaders. And our Senate sponsor, I want to have you hear from his own words what this means to him. Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel. Thank you, Senator.
Good morning. Such an honor to be here, Governor. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this bill is being signed today under the leadership of a woman, under the leadership of a woman governor, 2 women legislators who championed this bill, and a woman who leads the Senate majority, as my colleague Senator Fernandez knows so well. I want to thank those colleagues for their efforts. Assemblywoman Simotas, for 8 years in the trenches trying to get this bill passed, and of course Assemblymember Cruz for the last 3 years championing it, and now achieving success. Those women would not take no for an answer. At times, it seemed like the Senate wouldn't take yes for an answer, but we got there today. And I truly want to thank also Majority Leader Andrew Stewart-Cousins for making this bill a priority in the Senate. I want to extend my deep gratitude to the survivors who are here and the Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We indeed stand on your shoulders. And of course, we all remember just 2 years ago, Governor, when you signed the Adult Survivors Act in this very location, opening the door for thousands of New Yorkers to seek justice, including, as you mentioned, E. Jean Carroll. And there are 83.3 million reasons why we understand how deep the caustic effect of sexual assault and violence is in our society. Today, we make it easier for victims to hold rapists accountable and make it clear that in the state of New York, sexual assault of any kind will not be tolerated. We have worked hard in New York to make our state a beacon of justice for victims of sexual harassment and assault. And though there will always be more work to be done, today we take an important step forward as we make it crystal clear in New York that rape is rape. And the law is finally going to reflect that. Prior to the legislation being signed by the governor today, sexual assault could only be considered rape in a very narrow set of circumstances that depended on those narrow set of circumstances. This outdated definition is not only heteronormative and offensive, it simply wasn't true. We can't have our laws ignore the reality that so many New Yorkers, particularly LGBTQ New Yorkers among others, have experienced. In our community, the LGBT community, people experience sexual assault and rape at disturbingly high rates. Studies have shown that nearly half of transgender people in this country are sexually assaulted, nearly half, at some point in their lives. The numbers are similar for bisexual women and gay men. But before today, many of those assaults wouldn't be able to be classified as rape in New York State if the genitalia of the attacker and the victim didn't exactly line up with that was in our old legal language. But now we fixed that language. And with today's changes, our penal law has been updated by removing the requirements that were so outdated and expanding the definition to include various types of unwanted sexual conduct, not just the kind of sexual conduct heterosexual people engage in. We now have eliminated the crime of criminal sexual act, how these assaults are currently categorized in the law to recognize that rape is rape no matter the form. Our law now finally reflects the reality that sexual assault can happen in a number of ways and anyone can be a victim. Again, thank you, Governor, for signing this bill into law. It is such an honor to be under the leadership of such strong women in this Capitol. Thank you. And now, one of those strong women who shepherded the bill over the last 3 years through the Assembly and would not take no for an answer, Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. The subject matter of this bill signing may be uncomfortable to listen to and to talk about, but I implore you to consider what victims have been forced to endure due to the past failure of the change in this law. For decades, survivors who already struggled to come to terms with what has happened to them have been told that the horrible criminal acts committed against them are now statutorily categorized as rape. This is because our state's current law is enshrined in outdated gendered notions of rape. And instead of, it creates various categories of sexual assault for what is clearly rape. Imagine suffering the worst attack of your life, raped orally and or anally, your bodily integrity violated, resulting in your life never being the same again. But because there was no vaginal penetration, see Kenny, vaginal penetration. This is an internal joke. When I get nervous, I can't pronounce that word. So, and let me tell you, three years of debate on this bill can make you very nervous. The law does not recognize the forcible sexual acts of rape. And our law failed to understand the reality of sexual assault, the reality of violence, the reality that our law has failed survivors. Forced sexual contact against your will, whether it involves vagina, anus, or mouth, is an absolute violation of self and your trust, and calling it anything other than rape negates what we as survivors have endured. This insufficient and discriminatory narrative also leaves out victims of male on male, female on female attacks, often resulting in failure to prosecute the rapes committed upon members of our LGBT community. But today, rape is rape becomes law, and it is more than just a simple change in words. It's a systematic shift on how we think about who is a rape victim and who is a rapist. Survivors like Lydia Cuomo, who I've had the honor of getting to know over the last 3 years, and who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, are the reason why we've done this work. Back in 2011, when she was brutally raped by an off-duty police officer on her way to her first day as a teacher, he was convicted of predatory sexual assault and not rape because the jury couldn't agree if there was vaginal penetration. Think about having to be Lydia. Think about having to be in a courtroom to be told that what happened to you was not rape. I also want to thank former Assemblymember Arabella Simotas, who saw the injustice in Lydia's case and embarked on a journey to change the law. She introduced Rape is Rape, and I have to tell you, one of the most prolific litigators I've ever had the pleasure of getting to know. The debates on that floor over that decade were something to watch. And it was an honor when she asked me after she left the Assembly to take over the bill. Thank you for letting me carry it to the finish line. I'm also grateful to Speaker Hasty, who year after year prioritized this bill, generally early on in the session, because he knew that our law was failing survivors. And he stood with survivors and continues to do so because he knows that they deserve the justice. I also want to thank my colleagues who not only voted for year after year, but who were my support system. Because as a survivor, it was a very difficult task to get up on that floor and have to explain to people why what happened to us had to be recognized as rape. And it was my colleagues and my team who kept me sometimes laughing just to make it through. And so for that, I am thankful to you. I'm also very thankful to my team, to my chief of staff, because without the women in our life, we don't get to do this work. And Governor Hochul, I want to thank you and your team, because we worked all through the holidays and people said the things that they wanted to say, but we were working behind closed doors with your team all throughout the holidays so that we could get this right, so that victims of rape could be seen as such. And taking this swift action to sign the bill as soon as it would pass is something that we are eternally grateful for. I also want to thank your team, because those countless hours that they spend are going to ensure that when prosecutors are looking at a case of rape, they're able to charge it as such, and they're able to get the conviction and the justice that victims deserve. And I am eternally grateful to my partner in this, Senator Hochul, for getting it passed through the Senate. He jokingly said, we finally got it through. But it was frustrating. We would often have the conversations on the back end about how difficult this was, and you didn't give up and your team didn't give up, and for that I thank you. And I want to express special debt of gratitude to the New York State Coalition of Sexual Assault, especially Safe Horizon and their team, for their steadfast dedication to survivors. Every time I called for your help, you were right there to get it done. You always fought for the right of the survivors, no matter the politics, no matter how difficult it seemed. And lastly, I want to thank survivors, the ones who work in these very halls, the ones who expressed support, the ones who lobbied to pass the bill. I see you. You gave me the strength year after year to get up on the floor of the Assembly and explain why what happened to us was rape. And to anyone here and to anyone who is watching us, if you are a survivor of rape, know that you are not alone. There are resources to help you to begin healing and to seek justice. You can start by doing what I did, which was call Safe Horizon at their hotline on 800-799-7233. I needed to put that at the end because when I was at the end of my rope, it was Safe Horizon that saved my life. And we are here to give survivors the resources so that they can do the same and that they can seek the justice that for decades they couldn't get. And so once we sign, the law changes, and now rape will be known as rape. Thank you.
Guests, please remain seated while we take some photos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for all the love.
This takes a few minutes. Those of you who are veterans of this process. Everybody to get a pen is actually used.
It's a long time to sign a check.
I use one pen. I don't use my official name, which is Kathleen Mary Hochul. I'll go get later. I'll go get later. All right, thank you, everybody. Good morning. I also have Liz Fine, our counsel, who's free to answer any questions on topic. We'll start off with on topic as we signed a bill into law that changes the rape laws in the state of New York after a long, long wait. And I'm really proud that we could work with advocates and our partners in state government to get this over the finish line once and for all. So these survivors know that their wait has not been in vain, that we're finally able to properly define rape as it occurs in the state, giving another tool for our district attorneys and law enforcement to ensure that perpetrators are caught, prosecuted, and never able to commit those horrific crimes again.
All right, on topic? Karen?
Well, it's semi on topic. You answered most of the questions I had about the rape is rape bill, but I was wondering about some of the other criminal justice proposals that are out there. Wondering if there's any chance that bail reform, raise the age would be revisited, and also a lot of the criminal justice advocates are advocating for elder parole, eliminating mandatory minimum sentencing, and wondering if any of those have a chance.
Well, let's see what the legislature does. I mean, I don't speculate on what they will be doing. They were not put into my budget, so it's certainly something that they have full license and ability to review in their respective bodies, and if they choose to pass, then it comes to my desk. Hope it's not like last year when I had 500 bills dropped on me in about a week. I hope we can have more time to review them and have thoughtful conversations during the process, but we have focused intensely on reforms. We have data regarding the implementation of the bail laws, for example, and there's data that would show an interesting story on that, which we'll be happy to provide. So I'll wait and see what the legislature does.
John?
Governor, on the bill you signed today, there were extended chapter amendment negotiations. What got this over the finish line? What were the final hurdles that you needed to clear, language-wise, legal-wise? What can you say about that?
You know, we work closely with the district attorneys, who are actually the ones that have to be able to apply what would be proposed to the circumstances. And they raised a number of concerns about how this change in language could affect countless other pending current cases and past cases. So we want to make sure that this is only prospective going forward. And so that was important to just clarify that. But also, there are countless ways that the descriptions of rape show up in other parts of our statute, like many, so you have to go back and fix all those. So some of these aren't always entertained and addressed during the bill process, the bill review in the legislature, so that's where we come in and spend countless hours, and was a long time over the holidays I was involved, and I thank my team, led by Liz Fine, for working on this so intently. So we have to always make sure that whatever I sign actually can be implemented properly. So it's just more of those technical challenges. That's what took the time to make sure the DAs understood what we were doing, that we listened to them to make sure that there would be no situation going forward where we couldn't do exactly what we're trying to do here.
So I was curious that your reaction to first Senate Republicans yesterday were saying that the money for coming out of reserves for migrants should be reallocated to prevent the hold harmless from coming out of the foundation aid. Curious to hear your reaction to that, and also wanted to know the health committee chairs are leading an effort saying that that Medicaid should be privatized, and that would save about $3 billion that goes to for-profit insurers and corporations, and that would prevent the $1.2 billion that you want to move around and maybe take from long-term care, nursing home, and places like that. I want to hear your reaction to that as well.
Well, with respect to what the Republicans are saying, they really display a fundamental lack of knowledge when it comes to basic budgeting. The money for education is separate and distinct from the surplus, which is where I drew down the additional $500 million to help the city of New York deal with a crisis. 170,000, actually 172,000 people who have come, over 40,000 which are being housed. So we knew we needed to do something dramatic to help the city stabilize and to help them manage so we don't have people in the streets. So I thought it was important to help the city of New York, help the mayor manage this. So what I looked at was our reserves. You all know I've talked about reserves. I came here, we had 4% reserves, which is actually pretty dangerous given we didn't know the economic futures, the headwinds. So I worked hard over 2 years to take surplus money we had and put in reserves. We hit that 15%, which I will not go lower than, but because of growing interest rates, we were able to amass a larger fund balance than I thought was necessary. So I literally took the $500 million from that pot of money, okay? That is separate and distinct of how we run school runs and basically on formulas or even education or healthcare. So, it's not surprising that they would try to mix it up, but let me just say this about the Republicans. If they really do want to deal with this crisis and to stop it, why aren't the Republicans in the state of New York banding together and asking for their leadership in Washington to sign on to the bill that the Senate has negotiated? Republicans in the Senate have negotiated. There is a deal. There is a deal waiting to be signed. And they create the chaos. It's like, somebody sets their house on fire and then complains it could take so long for the fire department to respond. You created this by your inability and intentional inability to sign on to what Chuck Schumer has been negotiating, what President Biden wants, because President Biden has said he will shut down the border. He's willing to. He's done everything the Republicans have asked him to do. And now they keep moving the goalpost further and further back because they realize they don't really want to solve this. They like the chaos that it's created. So I'm just calling them out for what it is. So don't be disingenuous and try to tie this and scare everybody about education funding. I spoke about education funding right here a couple of weeks ago when I talked about my budget. I said I am proud that I have invested more in education than anybody in the history of this state. Almost 20% increase in just a couple of years. And I said to everybody, I said, this is not sustainable. I cannot do this every year. The taxpayers would not want me to do this every year. It's not sustainable at all. So I warned everybody. I said, don't call it a cut when you look at where we started in 2021 when I became governor and where we are today. Almost $7 billion more in education. I'm not saying go back to 2021. I'm just saying I can't give you an 18% increase on top of the $7 billion we just did. So I'm going to keep talking the truth to voters and to constituents and taxpayers and tell them the way it is. They understand this when I explain it. Plus sitting on surpluses. Schools are sitting on surpluses, and why do we have a funding formula that requires us to pay for people who don't exist? We have empty seats in schools. 75% of the schools are not getting the same funding they got last year under this hold harmless concept, which we really need to talk about that intensely, about the logic behind having formulas that are based on a run of what population was in 2008, as if there's been no out-migration, there's been no shifting, there's not schools that have more need that the money should be allocated for, and there's other schools that have 20% of the population. Why we're funding a program for kids who are not there? So I'm happy to talk about this anytime, anywhere, with anybody who'll listen, but we're just trying to inject common sense into the conversation. The same thing with health care. If you look at the graph, and I'll be happy to provide it, Medicaid funding over the last decade, the decade before my time in office, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 across the board. 7.5% increase last year. So everybody's screaming about the cuts. Look at the history. I'm trying to make up for lost time, but no, I can't give you $10 billion this year. I just can't. That's why we're looking at efficiencies, we're looking at insurance requirements. I'm looking at the healthcare system holistically. And again, I know these are the third rails. Housing is a third rail, education is a third rail, but I'm the governor of the state of New York. I have to inject common sense policies and do what's right for the voters to keep us on a trajectory where we're supporting our kids. I'm with our kids, I'm supporting our teachers, I'm also supporting our taxpayers.
Great. Elise in the back.
Governor, on the bill you signed today, do you think this could potentially impact the number of people who come forward and report rapes such as?
I hope so. I want to destigmatize what happens to these women. It doesn't happen usually in a crowded mall. I mean, this is in back alleys. This is when someone's attacked in their apartment, or this young woman on her way to work as a teacher, assaulted by an off-duty police officer in a parking lot, brutally assaulted. So I want there to be more conversation about this and let people know that the definition of rape is what you all would have thought it was, except our law didn't acknowledge that. It had a very narrow interpretation. And members of the LGBTQ community, they have been subjected to rape, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment associated with it. Come forward, prosecute the perpetrator, or else they're going to do it again. So we call on survivors as they're healing and getting support they need, and we are very sympathetic. But if you have it in you to come forward and have this person identified and prosecuted, know that the state of New York under this governor has changed the law to make sure that the full letter of the law is on your side.
Nick, last one.
Governor, the Civil Service Commission is moving forward or discussing a plan to hire migrants once they are approved to work in our country. Can you tell us a little bit about how that plan would work? How many people could potentially be hired? Would they be unionized workers? Just how would that program work?
As I've talked about the migrant crisis, and when I'm in Washington or I'm standing right here, I say we have a dual crisis. One is we have 170,000 people who came here just in less than 2 years. It's a capacity issue. It's extraordinarily challenging for the city of New York and the communities that have embraced the people who have come. We understand why they came. They came the same reason so many came before. But also, I have a shortage of worker crisis. And I have 460,000 openings right now in the state of New York. I have employers from the North Country, where I just was, up in Lake Placid, hotel owners and restaurant owners coming to me, can you send some of the migrants up here? We need them. I hear this in every corner of the state. But then I look at my own workforce. I have 10,000 openings in the New York State workforce, from our operations to SUNY. I have 10,000 openings. So this is to give options for people, but to say we are working intensely to get work authorization applications. These are all legal people. Every single one of them would have legal work authorization. And that's the step that's being taken now. I'm waiting for the federal government to share with us ways that we can connect people to match them up to the jobs. I have 40,000 jobs sitting in a database that we created from the Department of Labor. So we have a lot of opportunities. We have thousands of applications already underway. We just have to get the answer on which ones have been approved. And I'm anxious to get this moving quickly. And once they're approved, we can match people to jobs. They don't need to be reliant on services any longer, which I think is the objective, to not have people supported by taxpayers in our shelters. Let them, put them to work. That's the answer to this whole situation. Put them to work.
Governor, why not develop a comprehensive plan for the Empire AI initiative before requesting a $250 million funding authorization from the legislature?
I have a plan. Plans start with ideas. and I wanted to be quick to seize this before other governors did. I've heard from people in California who say they're actually jealous that this leader, this government have stepped forward and say, we see the capacity, and we've done economic development projects before. It's not complicated. We know this time I have already commitments from the private sector, an extraordinary amount of money, private sector money. I'll put in the amount we're talking about. It's $25 million a year for a decade. We can afford that. But now the most excited people about this are the SUNY and CUNY schools, as well as the privates, who are saying, we want to be at the leading edge of this revolution. We want our researchers and our professors and our students to be able to take advantage of this. So I want to move quickly on this. So we will work out all the details, but it's not complicated to me. This is about seizing the technologies of the future and saying your home is right here in New York. We should all be embracing this for its boldness, but also we have a path, we have funding. We're having a gathering on this this afternoon and talk to leaders, CEO of IBM coming here to talk about this, number 2 at Micron, who cannot believe we're doing this. Everybody is so excited about this. So I think that's the attitude we want to take.
So the regulators shouldn't expect any written plan, say with the Belmont proposal last year, there was an economic analysis. With Bill Stadium, there was an MOU. Something that gave at least a couple days ahead of the budget deadline, legislators some idea of what they were voting on. Should legislators expect any written details on this?
Well, they're excited about it, and they also know, we'll give them certainly a plan of what we're doing. We have a plan. We have a plan. It's.
Is it written? Is it a PDF document? What's the plan?
I will share the plan with you, but it's not a secret. I laid it out in my State of the State of what we're going to do. We're going to build a supercomputer, and I announced this week it will be built at the University of Buffalo with their engineering department. So the conversations are already going between our engineering teams at all these universities that want part of this on how we make sure that it's going to take some time to build this, but then we create the access, and we create the access for all of our students and those who want to be taking advantage of this. So this is going to be revolutionary. I don't think that we have every detail worked out in terms of which student's going to sit at what desk where. I'm not down to the micro level yet, but I'm going to be into big ideas, and there's very few things as big as this. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I didn't hear the first part of your question about the AI initiative.
No. In terms of the bill signing today, if lawmakers were to push ahead with a new look-back window for the Adult Survivors Act?
As I said, I don't telegraph what I'm going to do on future legislation, so we'll see what the legislature does on that.
I'm just asking, you talked about the DAs and negotiations,
Okay.
and maybe that's a question for council.
Okay.
Was it contemplated at all that if there's an open look-back window, how would this?
Do you have an answer on that, Liz? Do you understand the question?
If you open up the look-back window, say someone says, I didn't have a case before, or I didn't believe I had a case, I know it's civil, but I want to bring new charges because there's now a law on the books.
So
is there a way that...
the way the chapter amendment will work is it recognizes that there's no statute of limitations for rape, and the old law will be grandfathered in with respect to offenses that took place before enactment.
Thanks, guys. The full text of the chapter amendment